Thank you, Stefan, and it's very nice to be here, see all these people, and I hope that I can give you some flavor of Scandinavia. I am not going to talk about success. I have been written about successful school a lot, but last years I have been working with schools that are not successful. And most of what I'm going to say is about trying to change schools that are not successful. And we don't know really the result yet. So that's why I have that title, From Wreck to Success. And I think the subtitle is better. School as Agents of Democratic Sustainable Societies. I think it's very important that we have schools that help the society to sustain the democratic institutions. And in many ways, schools do in most countries. But there are things that happens, and sometimes you are puzzled. A year ago, we did an interview with the principal in a school in a challenging area. And we sat there and talked, and he said that students in this school could not get anything higher than the lowest grade. And first, of course, if I gave this question to you and you should sit together and talk in 3 minutes, you would probably come up with the challenging area, unemployment in the neighborhood, stuff like that. But what he did was not giving an answer on the structural level. He was giving an education answer. He said they can't read good enough. And of course, then you have a chance to fix it. Because if you know that a student in your school can't read good enough, it's possible to do something and try to change that. So he was kind of interesting in that sense that he looked at the students in that way. But of course, his school was in a very challenging area, and it was problems around it. It was low education among the parents and so on. But still, the student couldn't read. They hadn't been able to learn them how to read. Oh, I have been doing... there is two very central concepts, at least in Sweden in school. The first one is natural average of grading level. We have statistic data on it, and we can follow it year by year. And the other one is goal fulfillment. And the grading level, that can of course vary a lot from school to school, but the average is interesting to look at. The same thing with goal fulfillment. And in the Swedish system, goal fulfillment is measured by passing. So the lowest grade passing is the goal fulfillment in schools. And when you then look at the figures, the figures over from 2000 to 2016 has varied very little, around 75%, up to 78%. And maybe we should be proud of that. That's the average figure. But we could also say that 1 out of 5 students doesn't make it. And then we are not so proud about it. So of 1 of 5 students we take in, doesn't make it. And of course, these figures also varies. They varies. Some schools have almost 100% goal fulfillment, and others had much lower. And the schools we are working with in this project that I'm going to talk about, they have most of the time lower goal fulfillment, or at least on the average. So 1 out of 5 students in their school doesn't make it. If you compare that with the national average of grading level, you see it has increased. So what this means actually is that those students that pass, they have higher grading levels. The others are lagging more behind. And it has gone up from 203 to 221. So it's a pretty good increase in the grading average. And again, there are schools which has very, very high average, and also schools that are lower than this. But the schools we are working with, they are around the average or lower. And that makes it very interesting to see what can we do with them. Is it possible to change them? And of course, this has an effect on the society. Labor market challenges. The Swedish Labour Market Authority is saying that we are doing well in Sweden, but young people have difficulties to get a job. And what they have in common is that they are lacking a finished high school education. So when they don't get into the high school and they don't finish it, they will be out of jobs in Sweden or have difficulties getting a job. And in the same sense, this is from a call for proposals from the EU. And you see then the figures became much bigger. 70 million Europeans lack adequate reading and writing skills, and even more have poor numeracy and digital skills, what we are talking about here. 4.5 million young people still leave school without upper secondary qualification. And they are risking unemployment, poverty, social exclusion. And more than half of the 12 million long-term unemployed in Europe are considered as low-skilled. So, of course, schools has a very important place as an agent of the sustainable society, and that we can help to move ahead. And if you go to the Swedish context then, and searching for an explanation to the problem, we can say that it's a large problem on the national level. The national level doesn't really want this to happen. The politicians are trying to get around it, but if we go down to the local level, sometimes they are not as concerned. We did a study a couple of years ago when PISA results was coming, and asked what is a successful school, what is an effective school. We talked to superintendents, principals in many municipalities. No one referred to Finland. So success for them was not high PISA scores and that. Success for them was something local, and it was defined in local terms, which I find interesting, that there is a gap between the national level and the local level in the way they look at this. And what happened in the Swedish case? There were many, many state interventions. We have changed our teacher education 7, 8 times during the last 30 years with commissions. We had changed our principal training program, and we had a lot of commissions on other topics. We had a commission on the new school law, and we have a pretty good school law. And it came in 2011. I did a study in 2014-15 for the government, one of these reports, and I asked people in different stakeholder positions, do we need to change the law? Is there anything you should point out that is bad in the law? And everybody said no. There were no one who came with a concrete example of what should be changed. But at the same time, there were other things coming up, and we had an election, and the election, one of the promises in the election was to have a school commission. That school commission had just left his report, and the reviews are coming in, and they are pretty critical. And it's interesting to see that it's very difficult to put simple examples, simple way of changing the system so it could improve. And before the commission was finished, they put on another commission, which was on workload of teachers and principals. And now they are doing another thing again. They have another commission which is looking into do we have the right agencies for schools in Sweden? Could we take away some? Could we merge some into one instead of two, and so on? So they are looking for the problem. They're searching for the weak links in the governing chain. And again, people think that the politics and the implementation change are okay, but still it doesn't really work that way. Increase administrative workload for teachers and pupils, principals. And almost every report from the State Inspection Agency talk about low quality work or systematic quality work, that is have deficits. And it's interesting to see that we changed that from quality reports, and they put in the word systematic, and they put in the word work, which meant it should be done more or less regularly. But still, it's a document that is written in the late spring by the principal and sometimes by the first teachers. Your grading system, change in teacher education, school choice created increased homogeneity. And this is interesting. We have a right in Sweden to choose the school, and we have a semi-private system together with a public system. And what does it mean? It means that a lot of people pick schools in the private system or the best public school, which means the homogeneity in the schools are higher. So it's homogeneity even when it's low status, and it's homogeneity when it's high status. And this is affecting the schools. And this school report that was given out a couple of weeks ago or a month ago, they are trying to say that we need to have some kind of law or some kind of regulation that says that we need to have all social classes in all schools. And they give the tasks to the municipalities, but also to the principals. And I think it will be very difficult. It will maybe be a question in the election next year. Why low-performing school then? I think when we look at them and try to understand, cultural norms are not promoting high expectations. And in the project we were involved in, and some people in this room are, the ISSP, we found out there were things that were invisible underperforming schools. Schools that we thought were performing well because they were performing on a pretty good level. But when you checked for social background and things like that, they were really underperforming instead of what people thought they were performing. It's also in Sweden, we could say that the school leadership is weak, or there is a soft accountability system. In many countries, we talk about accountability, responsibility for the principal very much. In Sweden, we don't really do that. It's a soft accountability system, which means that very seldom principals are taken out of the jobs because the school is not good enough. The same thing with teachers. They are not taken out of the job. Stefan mentioned our colleague Leif Moos in the introduction. And he said the other day that teachers can, as long as they follow the law, be lousy teachers. And that's probably one of the problems in the soft accountability system, that if you don't do a very bad thing, you can stay. We also have problems in the organization, process, and structure. When you look at municipalities, the district level, they have very strict organization with different levels and so on. But when it comes down to the principal, it's very seldom that the principal have a good inner organization, and they are trying to start that now. And in the schools that we are working with now, they talk about the operating structure, and also then, on the other hand, they say the development structure, and try to create things like that. And this is also what is typical in the schools we are working with. It's difficult to create good working conditions for students. Systematic quality work I talked about. And also this, pupils with low ambition for themselves or the future. I think this is probably one of the most important things for teachers and principals, to talk about the future with students, to talk about that there is a bright future out there, but you have to understand how it looks like and try to create that kind of willingness to know. We have low parental involvement. So knowing all this, what is the next step then? Yes, and it's another governmental initiative, and we can call that, or it's called, Cooperation for Better Schools. And the way it's done is that the state school inspection are out there, and they find schools that doesn't perform well. And this is a simplification. And then the national agency goes and visit them and ask if they want to have help and what do you think they should have. And if they say yes to that, they are asked to make an analysis and tell what kind of things do we need to have help with. And when that is clear, there are some meetings, and then National Agency School contact universities, and the universities start working with them. And the way it has been set up is that we don't work for 3 weeks, we should work for maybe 2 years or so with these schools and try to change them. And how do we then get success in the process? And here is one part of the title. Can a car like that be nice again? The answer is yes. And when people that are in this business of making wrecks into nice cars again, when they see a car like this, they look what kind of things are left in the car. Is the engine there? Is the wheels there? Is it stable enough to start working with? And I think that is also what we try to do. And then we say, are there some readiness capacity? And I think that's interesting to think about. What is the readiness capacity? How should schools be to be able to improve? And we have been thinking of trying to explain that. We find knowledge and ambition that can be strengthened. So we go out there and we find that there is a lot of knowledge in the school. It can be strengthened, and it's weak, it's not done in the way we think it should be done. There is some kind of determination that we would like to improve the situation. And that can be anything from the leadership to the staff and so on. And confidence in student learning, that it will be able to do something. And trust in the ability of the teaching staff. We have leadership function that can be improved. We have inner organization that can be improved. Possibility to create collective norms and values. Collective expectation and cooperation. Staff that emphasize the way forward for the pupils. When this is at place, I think it's possible to go on and work. When we have nothing of this, the first thing we have to do when we visit schools like this is try to convince them that this is possible. And another thing is that too often we work with the principals, and we think that the principals is key to this. And yes, the principal is the key, but also all the other people in the organization. A couple of years ago, I was in the US and went to their big American Education Research Conference. And I went around to look at presentations about success. And every presentation about success, more or less, came down to how many people that were enrolled in it. And most of the time, they said 80–85% of the people in the staff in our school wants this. We work together, we have a common core, we have a common method, and so on. And when we have that, we are successful. And I think that is what I mean with readiness capacity. We need to have a lot of people that work together and that they really understand that together we can do it very well. And the last thing is a desire to ask for help. If the schools that we are visiting really don't want to have help, then I think it's a problem. And we have been in such schools where it's difficult, very difficult, to get them to think that we can learn them something or that we can learn something together. So I hope that we will be able to find schools that have this desire to learn, and then we can say that there are challenges for the principal. And one of these challenges is that if individual norms and values are dominating, the school organization often leads to weak collective perspectives. So one thing for all principals is to try to create collective perspectives of the school, or collective expectations. And also have clear responsibility setting of systems that we know where we are going. And if there are weak systems for internal accountability, nobody wants to take responsibility. And sometimes I can say that we have created problems like that in Sweden too. We have 5 categories of teachers. We have teachers that are legitimated, teachers that are not legitimated, teachers that are called first teachers and get extra money, teachers that was part of a boost salary system and got money there. And then we have those 5th group that didn't get anything at all. And of course, if you want these 5 groups of teachers to work together, we have to be very skilled, because they feel that they have been evaluated from the leadership and they have been coming to different positions. Accountable leadership, is that the solution? And I think that we must have principles that take responsibility and show that they can and they do it also. It's create collective norms and values and create some high expectations. And if that is in place, I think you can go pretty far. What happened here? So, and now I show another car. So it's the same car, but it has been remodeled, and they had done a lot of it with it. And instead of talking about turnaround schools, I would like to talk about schools with kind of improvement orientation. And what I've tried to talk about earlier is that we need to find that kind of orientation to improve in schools, and we can discuss what kind of factors there are, but we need to find those. If we can probably improve the schools pretty well. And when working with these schools, there is very clear that leadership and staff must be committed to it. And there I think it's important that we will work for 2 years, because we always start to work with the principal and the principal's leading group and so on. But if we should have change, I don't think the principal himself or herself is able to do all the change. We need to be many people talking about what's going on. And we find that the meetings we have when we go out to these schools, they have to be very well prepared. And in that sense that there is also homework for the people who are taking part of this. Okay, now I know what I'm doing. So working between meetings is very central. And to work between meetings can be looking at the statistics, looking at data, looking at what the grading system are, how we learn together in collective learning. One student of mine was very proud of her school because it was so much collective learning in the school. And then they decided to write about it and tell everybody how good they were. She came back and she was very sad. She had realized that collective learning was just a talk. It was not the trust in the organization that was needed to have collective learning, really. And she started a project to try to change that. So I think it's also important that we come behind the words we use, like collective learning. And changing schools like this to get the red nice car, it's no quick fix. It's a long-term process, and we have to really think about what we are doing. And I think to really emphasize that it's not enough with just working with leaders, the leadership's group. We must involve teachers if we should change these schools into better places for learning. And there must be clear achievement goals in relation to what we are doing. Achievement goals that we can go out and we can adjust them when we are working. So we can't really set up a way to work very early. We need to see what happens and what is coming up. And I can give you one example of that. In one municipality that we are working with, the central office had decided that the school should use a certain statistical model to show how the standards of the students. The National Agency of Schools had a very simple model asking for the same thing. The teacher was furious because it took a long time, it was a lot of work. And when we, during a session, asked the central office that you must have a good argument when you ask teachers to do this, that takes so much more time. The man looked at me and said, sorry, I don't have that. I need to think about it. So I think a lot of these kind of changes, they build on that there are good salesmen from different agencies that come out and try to sell data computer system. And now when the digital world is coming closer, we have to be very aware of that it's problematic. And finally, I think it's very important that we follow what we are doing in this project through systematic evaluations and try to find out what works and what doesn't work and learn together. So finally, thank you for listening.